Thank you, RL. Thank you, Max. Good morning, everybody. So, what are we going to talk about? So we're going to talk a bit about healing today. Healing today in the world seems a little elusive. What is it? How do we get there? And in the Science of Mind philosophy, we say that healing is not something that you have to attain, it's something that you uncover, that it's always present. And as I was thinking about that as Pamela was doing her reading and talking about shooting stars, that the stars are a perfect analogy of healing. So my first trip each morning with Will the Wonder Dog is about 5:30 and 6 o'clock in the morning. And I was much more open to it about 2 months ago. And I'm less open to it now, but it is still necessary. And I know it's going to become even less desirable within the next few weeks, but it will still be necessary. But one of my great joys in the morning is that I get to look at the night sky. And I live in a part of the valley that the sky is pretty dark. And so it's really wonderful, and I never get tired of doing it. But some mornings, there's clouds, and you don't see the stars. I grew up in a part of the world in Los Angeles that there were no stars. there was too much light, and the rare occasion that I would be someplace like camping or something that you would see them, it would just be awe-inspiring. But they're still there. And that's how we teach and look at healing in the Science of Mind philosophy, that regardless of what you see and regardless of what you experience, the pureness and wholeness of healing is there. And that we don't have to get there, that, again, it is something that we seek to uncover. And as we work with the concept of healing, to know that, again, it's not something that we are devoid of. It is something that we just have to get there because it's already here. And I know those words sound great, unless if you are ailing from somebody or someone. I can turn of words, somebody. And we need healing sometimes in our bodies, and we need healing in our finances. We need healing in our relationships. And there are so many ways that we could say that we need healing in the world right now, and it can be difficult to think of it as being there already and just needing to be uncovered. But it is. And it also is difficult to think of healing and how it shows up, how we would like, and how it shows up in ways that we don't like. My class last week, we talked a bit about the difference between a healing and a cure. And it sounds like we're splitting hairs, and we are and we aren't. So healing is a movement of consciousness where we have a shift within us that we shift and change in a permanent way inwardly. And that shift then starts to show up on the outside world in our experience. But it sometimes shows up not in ways that we would prefer. In other words, when I seek healing, or especially if it's something physical, I have a really specific idea of what that will show up like as, say, a cure, of what I want my physical body to do. And of course, it's very intellectual just to talk about how cures aren't important unless if you need one. An example I gave at my class this week is, over the years I've had little issues with my lower back. And not too bad. I think I had a little thing a couple weeks ago. It's just like, I know it's there, and just move a little bit differently. But I've had some episodes, and thank God it's been a long time, where I would have 3-day periods where I would literally have to sleep sitting up on the couch with pillows on me, because if I didn't, it felt like someone had like an ice pick and a hammer. And so when you're experiencing that, you want a cure, and you want it now. I mean, you really do. It's no longer this intellectual thing about the difference between healings and cures. It's like, I'm in for the cure. Healings are great. I don't even care if I have a healing. I just want the cure. I mean, we just want to be out of pain. And certainly any other part of our life in non-physical realms, whether it's relationships or finances or any other in our work life, if we're feeling that pain, we just want it to be over with. And I'll talk about lessons later. I just don't want this difficulty and this pain to happen right now. But Nonetheless, it has to start with the road to healing. And to realize that the road to healing sometimes shows up exactly how we want and sometimes does not. I think this has been a big lesson in our faith community, the larger faith community of Centers for Spiritual Living over many, many decades. This idea of somehow that if you can truly change your thinking and your belief system, you should be able to micromanage everything in your life and the way that it looks. And there are many that I probably still believe that today, and that if you have what appears to be a negative circumstance in your life, that somehow that means that your thinking isn't quite together. You don't have quite enough faith. You don't quite have that sort of thing. But on the road that I've been and observed, that's not really the case. And I think one of the biggest lessons that we had as a larger denomination was probably in the 1980s, and I know I've mentioned this before, when there was one of my colleagues at that time who has since passed, became the minister at a center in Huntington Beach. And there was something about her, Peggy Bassett, that was, I don't know, charismatic, and people were drawn to her. And she just had this message that people related to, that you truly could change your thinking and belief patterns and dramatically change the course of your life. And people did. And they went from a congregation of about 200 to about 5,000. I mean, it was just like, it was the right message at the right time. And I have a colleague now who was an assistant minister there at that time. She's still a minister in the field now. And she says, we didn't even know what we were doing and why it was so successful. It was just like people kept showing up. It's like, what do you suddenly do when 1,000 people or more show up on a Sunday when you're used to 200? And it's like, we always say those are the kind of problems you want to have. And again, she was just like held as this pinnacle of someone who could facilitate the shifting of consciousness for all of us. And then she got cancer. And people were devastated. And they were devastated because they thought, if she can get cancer, that means anyone can get cancer. If the person that we put up on like the mountaintop can get ill, what does it mean for a schlub like me that can barely get out of bed in the morning? And so there was just this grief within that congregation, and just questioning, what is this philosophy? I mean, was it all a lie? What was it? But actually, she modeled healing in a different way. That her road to healing was not a road to a cure, and that she modeled healing with great grace and courage, showing that, truth be told, we're all going to exit this life at some point. We like to pretend that we aren't. We like to pretend that somehow that if I have a higher consciousness, I can be well and look like 30 years old forever. I'm not sure I really would want to be in that program anyway. To look 30 as long as I'm here would be nice, but the forever thing, I don't know. I think there's other, as they say, fish to fry in this universe that I think would be stuck. And the great lesson, not only for them, but as for Centers of Spiritual Living, was to reevaluate this idea that higher consciousness meant always that things showed up exactly how we want it to show up. And that same lesson has shown up in my life so many times as a minister, particularly on a personal note. I had, of course, I graduated from School of Ministry in 2000, and you really bond with the people that you go through that obstacle course with, in a sense. It's, a 3-year master's program. Most of us families and working full time and going to school and just wondering, where is this all leading? Just, there's no time. But there's 2 people in particular that I love so much, who I graduated with, and both of them passed within the last 4 or 5 years. And sometimes I miss them both so much it hurts. And yet, they walked their path, both in cancer, with such grace and courage. And I often think, could I do the same? I like to think I could. But when I look at the path that they modeled for us, I dare anyone to say that there was a lower consciousness there because they passed. The closer they seem to get to their passing, the brighter of a light they seem to have around them. I mean, it was just amazing. And you know how when you see someone that just seems to, at least in consciousness, have some of that little bit extra, you kind of think, well, how did they get that? I want some of that. And of course, there's that thing there is that, well, I don't want their physical disease, but I want this place that they seem to have created for themselves in this process. So again, their physical state had nothing to do with, I guess, a lower consciousness. And then I always think now of another friend of mine who was not in ministry. Her husband was. And she had went into cancer for a third time, and after over a 15-year period, something like that. And she had told me, and of course everyone was, yeah, you'll beat it again. You know, you did the last 2 times. And she told me, she says, you know, it feels different this time. I'm not sure if I am, and she said this very, very sincerely. She said, I'm either going to get cured and go on with the rest of my life, or it's going to kill me and I'm going to go on with the rest of my life. And I loved that. This higher consciousness of, yes, we want it to look a certain way, but it might not. And that there still is the opportunity to arise in consciousness. And again, the reason why things don't always show up the way that we would like, to me, is one of the biggest mysteries of living here on earth. I do think we came here intentionally. I think we chose our circumstances to a certain extent because I believe we are always at choice on some level. And I think of these lives that we lead on earth are a bit of an obstacle course. Let's see if we can get through this. Let's look at that challenge and see what we can do, and let's look at this thing that we just don't want it to show up as that thing, but yet it does anyway. And how do we rise in that occasion in consciousness and just walk through it anyway? So I think it's really, in a way, a fantasy to think that, quote unquote, a higher consciousness means you don't get challenges. You never get ill. But it still means that healing is always available. And healing is available through different means. I think this is such a good topic, especially now. How odd that we're in a pandemic. I mean, really, haven't you just woke up some mornings ago? Well, how did this happen? I mean, really, it's just like we were just minding our business, having a nice kind of life, the normal things that go wrong, and this all happens, kind of thing. And it has colored everything that we do. It has brought up certainly any number of conflicts with people, with different categories around this. And it's brought up again this discussion in the Science of Mind community about healing. Of course it does. Of course it has. And there has been this discussion amongst many that somehow if we are of higher consciousness, we wouldn't get it. If we are higher consciousness, we wouldn't have to wear masks, or at least be recommended to wear masks. If we were higher consciousness, we wouldn't ever have to go to the hospital or get a vaccine or anything like that, because we have elevated ourselves. We are walking on water. We don't need any of this stuff. I'm just walking on water. You know, here's a little clue. The moment you declare yourself as able to walk on water, that's usually the first thing to know you're going to sink. I mean, I know, it just kind of happens that way. It's this ego thing. And so even to the point that that's the leadership for Central Spiritual Living released a statement, and I included a link to it this week in my blog. And if you would like to have this and you don't get my blog, email us at office@lightofthemountains.org and I'll email it to you. But it wanted to state 2 things. And here's a quote they gave from Ernest Holmes, our founding philosopher. He says, "We have no objection to any form of healing. Anything that will help overcome suffering must be good, whether it takes the form of a pill or any medical intervention or a prayer. We are glad when anyone is healed or helped by any method. We believe in any and all methods and know that each has its place in the whole. So this is so important. So we have this fantasy about prayer that, again, I always refer to that there is a Federal Express God. That anything you put in your order form will just plop magically, like a magic wand, onto your front doorstep. And we like to think about that with healing as well. If I pray aright, as they say, I will be uplifted and rise out of any dis-ease that I have. And sometimes that happens, actually. It happens more than sometimes. But the way that prayer is answered, and more often than not, is through ideas and inspiration and guidance. That if your path to healing may not be in the instantaneous touch the hem of the garment type healing, it may be that through your guidance it will be to go to the right medical doctor or the right homeopathic remedy or any number of things that exist in the world that all are part of the divine and God, that there's one or two with probably your name on it. And that prayer, many of the prayers that we do in our ministry of prayer for our prayer practitioners, ministers, is not necessarily to pray for instantaneous poof healing. It's for guidance. Show them the way. Show us the way. For all of us, as we navigate this interesting world that we have found ourselves in, my prayers have been for guidance. Because there's a lot of days I don't know where we should be going, honestly. So the prayer should be where to go. What is the right avenue for this? That we're really clear in Central Spiritual Living that we don't shy away from medical interventions. There are so many of them, and pray for guidance which one is yours, if any. And in this, the same stance on vaccinations. We don't tell anybody to get vaccinated or not get vaccinated. But we also don't give a religious exemption because our faith doesn't say you don't go to doctors. Go to doctors as you are inspired, and it may or may not include a vaccination. So science of mind does not mean that it will only happen by your upliftment of your consciousness and everything that you don't like will go away. And I know that's sometimes difficult to take because we just want it to go away. We want all this stuff to go away. And I don't want to have to make decisions about medical things. I don't want to have to even go to the doctor or even seek out alternate things. It just is, there's too much information on the internet. How am I going to sift through it all? But that's how prayer works and how guidance works. It starts to streamline us. So let's even talk more specifically about prayer and how prayer can work today. And first, to move beyond the idea that prayer is a beseeching and asking something separate from us, outside of us, to do us a favor. That's not how we look at it in our faith. We look at prayer as something, the only thing that we can do in prayer is to change and shift our own consciousness. So any prayer that you are doing, you are praying to, in a sense, with the help of Spirit and the divine, to shift and show up as a better version of yourself in the world. And sometimes that includes great healing. Sometimes that includes great physical healings and cures. But the whole point is to shift yourself. A quote that I love from Marianne Williamson in a book that she wrote about healing, it says, a big shift in consciousness for anyone is when your prayers go away from God, please change the world, to God, please change me. And that's what prayer is for us in Science of Mind. It's, please change me. Because if I show up differently, the world will be different. And so we have a way of doing prayer. And prayer is talking to ourselves and the consciousness within ourselves for a change, changing ourselves. And when we do prayer, the first thing that we acknowledge, which sounds great at first, and it's kind of one of those good news, bad news, is you go, oh, I didn't know it meant that. The first part of the way that we pray is to acknowledge that the presence of the divine, of Spirit of God, is within everything, at the cellular level, that the creative force of the universe is everywhere. And that includes everywhere that we don't like, in people that annoy us, in situations that have traumatized us. The presence of the divine is right there. And the way that it is a creative force that we have free reign and will to use to make good and to make bad. But it is still there. Think of it, the world is all made out of Play-Doh. As a kid, you could make anything out of Play-Doh, right? You could also get it stuck in your 1970s shag carpet, which my parents hated. So it was bad Play-Doh. And then there was good Play-Doh. But it was still all Play-Doh, wasn't it? When it got down to it, it was just Play-Doh. Whether it was in the carpet or having fun making, little ashtrays with it, it was still Play-Doh. And so part of that, as we begin to pray, is to realize that it is everywhere. And yes, I don't understand why it is in the things that I don't like and don't understand. But the fact is, it is there, and I can harness that with my own intentions to create something better than what we have right now. So that's the first step. And in that, to realize that healing is not something, a destination, is a place where you are already that needs to be revealed. So that's the first aspect of prayer, is to this big idea of God is all there is. And the second aspect of it is that it includes me. Sometimes it can be easy to see the presence of the divine in all things, but not me. Somehow we see ourselves as separate. Somehow we see ourselves sometimes as not worthy. But you are, and it is right there. And that is the key to shifting your own consciousness. It is not something outside shifting you. It is something from within that is shifting you. And you can only do that if you are willing to admit that the presence of Spirit is right where you are. And as we do that, we make our statement for transformation. It's funny, when we pray or make an affirmation, I think most of us are familiar with that process. We think of course, we go from this big idea of God is all there is, and it's in me, and then we go to try to micromanage that power. That healing needs to show up exactly like this for me. My finances need to be healed exactly for me like this. My relationship have to be exactly like this, and people show up in a certain way for me to see it as being healed and whole. Those kind of prayers are somewhat of a waste of time because they don't work. Because then we go from saying God is all there is to, and I want to use that to change everybody and everything that comes in my path. Again, let's go back to the first thing. The only thing you can change is you. So I don't pray, in a sense, for myself for specific outcomes. Because, again, it doesn't work. The only prayer I do, specifically these last couple years, is for guidance, for clarity, for me to recognize that guidance, and for the courage to be able to take that guidance into the physical world. And that's not always easy. So, guidance, clarity, and courage to follow through with the guidance that I've received. And like all of you, there's some mornings I just want to stay in bed and put the covers over my head. I don't want to make those phone calls. I don't want to have that conversation with so-and-so, even though I feel guided to do that to bring on healing in the situation. I just would kind of like to hang out with Will the Wonder Dog today. And sometimes it's good to do that. We all need a break, and we all need time with Will the Wonder Dog. But the answers of your prayer actually do give you that certitude and courage that this may be uncomfortable, but this is the path that I'm being shown. That's how prayers are answered. It's not how things necessarily showing up on your porch. It's that certitude of this is the path that I'm shown to take. The next part of what we do in prayer is to just simply express our thanks. And of course, at our time of prayer, you may not see the result. You may not have received the guidance yet. You may not have had that ping that this is the direction that we go. That we come to know that gratitude is not a transactional feeling, that you can express gratitude up front, like pay it forward kind of thing. That I am in gratitude because I know my prayer can't help but be answered through the inspiration and guidance that I will receive. It's a done deal. It's a sure thing. The way I want things to show up in the world aren't a sure thing, but the guidance is a sure thing. It does, and it will happen. It may happen in that moment. It may happen as I'm falling off to sleep that next night. It may happen as I'm just taking a small hike or looking up at the stars. That I get that inspiration. That's how it happens all for us all. We open that door to the divine, and at the right moment, we just get that little bit of information that says, go that way. Try that way. Talk to that person. Open your heart and mind in this way that seemed so frightening before. Do it now. And then, of course, the last part of our prayer is simply, first and foremost, just to let it go. To let go of our conditions of it. Let go of our conditions of what healing has to look like. To literally let it go. And we talk often about with no attachment to outcome, but boy, is that hard place to reach. We all have of course, we're human beings and we make choices, and we have been given the power of making our choices in our life. So at this level, to say that I'm a being of choice, and now I'm told in a sense that the best thing I can do is to not have a choice. Well, that's not entirely true. The choice you're making is to know that there is a power and presence within you that sees the bigger picture. That as you open yourself up to it, you will see amazing things that you didn't even know were possible. That if you stick in your idea of what it has to be, you'll never see the even more amazing things that could be. That releasing attachment to outcome is saying, there are so many amazing, wonderful things that I haven't allowed myself to see, and I blocked myself because I've been, in my own blinders of what I think is so. That all of us here today and on live stream, we all have examples of where we went someplace kicking and screaming only to realize it was the best thing we ever did in our life. Because we finally opened up to a larger vision. We finally released our attachment to a way that we thought it could be, and something amazing happened. So why not just release this attachment up front? Why don't we just get to it? Why go kicking and screaming? Just do it. And I think that's the lesson of today. Pray for guidance. Listen to what that is, whether if it's decisions in your family or decisions that we make in our community and the big world right now, because the world is waiting for us all to transform and open up to guidance. And as we do this, the scary thing is that we may only be able to see the first couple steps ahead. I don't know, I like long-range planning myself, don't you? I like to know what step 20 is going to be. But more, especially today, in a day of great change in the world, we don't have that luxury. All you can do is ask for guidance for the next little bit, and then the next little bit. And I think that's what we are here doing at Light of the Mountains. In faith communities, we like to have this larger idea, a larger intention of what we're doing in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Our intention is to all open up to guidance and go wherever that is. I don't know where that is. But the challenge is to stay in that space of receptivity, of openness, of listening, of not getting stuck in what we think has to be and opening it up to what can be. It's not easy, is it? So, I think that's all I have to say today. So, and let's practice the prayer I was talking about this morning. Let's just go within. And let's just follow the steps and the outline. Spirit is all there is. It is all there is. It's at the cellular level. And it is in things that we don't like. It's in things that we say that we hate, and it's in things that we don't understand. But the creative force is there. And it is within each one of us. And we have a great power of choice. We can uplift and transform that presence of spirit in areas that are troubling into ones that are magnificent. We can do that in our lives, and we can do that in our community, and we can do that in our world. And we choose to do that right now. We stay centered and focused. We accept guidance. We accept our openness of heart and mind. And we accept the courage to follow through. These are all available in abundance, and we accept them right now. And as we accept these qualities of guidance and courage, we give thanks. We may not see where we're going right yet in this second, but we give thanks because we know that the guidance is right here and available and within us right now. And in that thanksgiving, we do what we as humans sometimes have the most difficult thing to do. We let it go. We say, your will, not my will. We get out of the way and let ourselves at the same time to be amazing vessels of healing. And we just let it be. And so it is.